I didn't hear the classic. This meeting is being recorded. Did you all receive a message
I got a
confirming that it
pop-up.
is?
It
Okay,
popped up.
perfect. All right. So, good evening, everyone, and welcome. Uh, my name is Nina Hirota, and I am the VP of Programs for the ATD Suncoast chapter. So, thank you all so much for joining. I am told that there was an issue with the original link in the reminder, but that you received another message. And based on your participation and joining, I appreciate the fact that you persisted and joined because we do have um, a very interesting theme and a great speaker uh, uh, with us tonight. So we have the pleasure of welcoming Dr. Jane Bozarth. I hope I pronounced it correctly, uh, who will talk about the research she recently published about employment and pay in learning and development. And I don't need to read her credentials. You see it on the slide here, but certainly they speak for themselves and more than justify her current role with the Learning Guild as their director of research. And I was visiting the site and obviously could notice a series of other researches that you've been publishing over time. So thank you. Uh, Thank you for bringing your expertise tonight. And as we talked about her participation, we decided we wanted to make this session as interactive as possible. And you certainly observed how welcoming and interactive she is, even before presenting. So we want to allow time for Q&A, but and I wanted to remind you that there are two ways to submit your questions. When it's either by unmuting yourself when we open for Q&A, or to post your questions through the chat. I will be happy to moderate, even though I think that Jane could run the show all by herself. And I also wanted to remind everyone, as you can see in the footnote on the slide, that we're recording this session. And this is for the benefit of the members who were unable to participate tonight and were equally interested. Uh, Notice, please, that your image may be used in our social media and marketing communications. Okay. And the other great news is that Jane has authorized us to share a copy of tonight's presentation. So please check our website in a few days, not just for the handout, but for a copy of the research and the link to the recording tonight. And with that, I'm sure we're all interested in learning about salaries, bonuses, intent to change jobs. So let me hand it over to you, Jane.
All right. Well, welcome everybody. Let me get the slides up. I am delighted to be here. I love working with ATD groups. And it's been a weird 12 months for that. So it's nice to be in a chapter meeting tonight. It looks like some of you know me. I recognize one of your names, and I apologize if I don't recognize others. So for those of you who don't know the story, I was a classroom trainer, and then I morphed into an e-learning type person. And I was with North Carolina State Government for 2 decades and a little bit more. So I was a working trainer, a working classroom person, a working e-learning person, a person working with no budgets, a person working in a hierarchy with bureaucrats. So that was my background. And when I left that role, when I left the state, the e-learning guild's position for the director of research was open, and it was a very good fit for me because it gave me the opportunity to use my doctorate in ways that I really hadn't in my job, and it's a nice switch. So I've been with them now since 2018, January 2018. And I produce a research report a month for them, usually by myself. Sometimes I have co-authors, sometimes we have guest authors, and they take different forms. I may do a literature review on something like learning styles or personality type indicators. Sometimes I do sort of a review of what's going on with current trends in technology, how people are using a certain technology like AR, VR, or simulation. Occasionally I do a case study of a company. We have a company here who's doing a lot of work with VR, and I was able to go in for several visits and do a nice deep dive with them. And occasionally we do a survey, primarily targeted at our members. We have about 100,000 members. And I should let you know, if you don't know about the Learning Guild, for many years it was the e-Learning Guild, and it's rebranded and changed in the last 18 months or so. So a lot of the data we have, particularly historical data, comes from people who are tightly focused on online learning and technical stuff, or being in technical roles. And that is changing. And it's interesting that it was happening this year, because so many people have started moving online stuff really quickly from classroom to online because of the circumstances created by COVID. So it ended up being kind of an interesting time switch. So I'll try to be clear about the people I'm talking about and about the roles they might be in while we're going through this. So a few things about this kind of data. When you're looking at salaries and even sometimes perks and other issues surrounding people working in L&D, this will not surprise any of you. There's a lot of overlap. If there's a single word that defines the challenge for this kind of working with the data around this, we have a lot of people who have very unclear job titles. There's a lot of overlap between designer and developer. There's overlap between designer and deliverer, right? So it can be hard to tease out some of that. There is very little clarity across our business about the difference between any role and the senior version of it. You know, it seems to depend on years of work more than anything else in my experience. You know, and that may explain the wide range of salaries when we get to talking about that in just a few minutes, is that there's just not a lot of clarity around the kind of roles that people are in. There's also there are some challenges with vocabulary. I find that people use words like course, class, and curriculum interchangeably, and that can make it difficult to understand what they do or what level they are working at. Sometimes people use terms like media creation that may be synonymous with something very specific like video production. So it can be challenging to figure out who's doing what and who's being paid what to do which things, but we'll try. So something else that happened, we have been in the habit of doing a fairly in-depth salary survey every year-ish, and that predates me by a decade. And what happened in 2017, there was a very extensive survey. There were dedicated staff for that, working on it for a long period of time. It's, I think, 70 pages long. And I would like to say that data is only 3 years old. The data was gathered in 2017 and published in February 2018. So I would say for a lot of the things you might be interested in, the data has not changed drastically. It doesn't change that much from year to year, but it was a very extensive study with many, many, many factors were examined. Last year, I don't need to tell you, was different, and we were not after that kind of depth. We just wanted to see if people in our business were still working, if they had significantly seen changes in their salaries, if people were unemployed from it. So we did, I think it was 8 questions. It was promised to be like a 5-minute survey. So I have the data from that, and I have it open over here. If I need to look at something, if one of you has a question, I can get to it, but I might need to look away for that. So what I want to do is offer you the current data, but also where it seemed appropriate or interesting for you. I brought in some of the more the older data, and I will be very clear which version of things I'm talking about. I'm assuming that makes sense. Tell me in chat if it doesn't. And in the middle of that, in 2019, because the data was still at that point, the older data, the 2017 data wasn't that old yet, I just did a look at the market. We knew what people said they were doing and what they were being paid, and I wanted to see what the market said it was hiring and what it claimed it was paying and that kind of thing. So I did a pretty extensive look at job postings. I think upwards of 400 of them, maybe better than that, from places like Monster.com and LinkedIn and some of the bigger sites, a few European and UK sites in Canada, just to see what people said they were hiring, how they were describing the jobs they were hiring for, what they were indicating that they wanted in terms of skills and that kind of thing. And I'm going to reference that a bit too, but I'll be really clear about which thing I'm talking about when. So let's get going. So we did the survey, the 2020 survey was in November, quick and dirty, 5 minutes, 8 questions, I think. We had about 700 responses, which is about typical for a quick little survey that's only open a couple of weeks. And you can see by far, if people chose a specific role, it was instructional designer, or we included learning experience designer because some people are now calling it that. Sometimes not with much differentiation, but so about a third of our respondents were instructional designers, followed by the next biggest category is the generalist. I would bet you know a good many of these people who say they do a little bit of everything. We're going to talk about that some more later and the way that impacts salary. In some cases, that was people who do a lot of work in L&D. They may design and develop and deliver something. They may design and create the e-learning course for it. They may do that. But you also have people who maybe do those things and run the LMS. Or you may have people who do that and they're the safety officer. Or they're the EEO person, or all three of those things. So we see in this business a lot of generalists, as you can see from the responses. We had some who did specify that they were team leads or team managers or higher level management, not a lot of those. And I was a little surprised, given our usual membership, that we didn't have more saying they were primarily LMS support. Now, a number of those people who said they're generalists are probably also doing some of that, but we didn't have many dedicated that way. And as far as other went, we had a couple of librarians. We had a few like school media specialists that differentiated themselves for some reason. We had some people who were dedicated to working with data. Some people were responsible for business development. One person said that they had to do the bookkeeping. So people kind of all over the place, but primarily instructional designers and generalists, and then also the trainers were in there. As a category, higher education was a big bucket, and it did get a great deal of response, but some of the other buckets, the things we sliced, were a bit smaller to start with. So we saw a good many people from IT and technology and healthcare. We usually have people from finance and banking. Hospitality was low, but I wouldn't say it's necessarily a lot lower than we're used to compared to other older surveys. I kind of expected there'd be a big drop off here because of the pandemic, closing restaurants and hotels and entertainment venues and that kind of thing, but it didn't seem like that was significant. I have an acquaintance I know is a trainer at an airline, and his work has not really been affected, although the airline certainly has. So there's that kind of thing. And then other really are sundry. There really wasn't a pattern much there. People kind of all over the place about things that they did. So here's the deal. Almost everyone is working full-time in a traditional job. Some of those people said that they are freelancing on the side. I imagine you know a lot of people who do that, as do I. We had a small amount working part-time. I guess I thought there'd be more of that, and I was expecting more freelancers. It just may be that the people in my social world are freelancers, tend to be working on their own in some capacity. And again, sometimes people were doing both. As for the unemployed, we had a little tiny bit were unemployed by choice, but we had 4.3%, and in the data, I think that worked out to 32 people. So not a huge N on that, but of those 32 people, 28 said that they were unemployed because of COVID. Okay, so pretty significant when you're looking at unemployment, when like 9/10 of it is they said was COVID related, and presumably they would not have been unemployed in a different year. So that didn't trend with other things we were looking at. And again, that's really what the survey was aimed at. We really wanted to see what people were doing and how they were doing it, and whether the events of 2020 had affected them. So this was the final word. The overall for all of those groups, for all of those people, was about $86,000. And that is in keeping with past data. It's a little, it's crept up a little bit every year, kind of keeping up with inflation and market rates and what have you. But I want to be clear that this includes CLOs and it includes the managers. This was everybody who responded. I did take out an outlier. We had a trainer in California who said they were making $200,000 a year, which means we all need to go be that trainer in California. it skewed $40,000 higher than I think anything else, even the CLOs. So I did take that out and I was honest about it, because looking at the numbers, it skewed the overall $2,000 or $3,000, and it didn't make much sense. I'm still not sure what that's about. We need to find out more about that job, but I did take that out. Now, looking at the job roles, individual contributor types like the instructional designers or generalists tended to be at about 83,000. And of course, the senior managers were higher, but this was what the average was for all of those respondents. It was higher. Salaries were, and I don't think this is a surprise yet. I think it's going to change. I'm interested to hear what you think. The salaries were highest clustered around New York and Los Angeles. That's not really a surprise, in San Francisco. And ID jobs in those areas were running up into the $120,000 range. ID similar jobs in Atlanta were running in the $45,000 and $50,000 range. So there's a significant difference. But I'm wondering in a year or two what we're going to see fall out from that because of COVID. Because increasingly we are reading that people don't need to, and I'm going to talk about this some more. People don't need to live where they work. That companies have started to get that it can be remote. And that means they can hire from different pools. It means employees can live in different places. It'll be interesting to see how that affects salary in a few years, because I have heard of some companies who say, we don't care where you work. I have heard of some companies who say, well, if you're going to live in Atlanta, we're going to pay you the Atlanta market price for you. We're not going to pay you New York dollars if you're not living in New York. So I'm curious to see what's going to happen. The Learning Guild is focusing on senior level L&D. I'm not sure what you mean. The Learning Guild focuses on anybody involved in the business. And we did have some respondents. We had 10% of our respondents were team managers or supervisors, and less than 1% were CLO level people.
This is Joanne, and I know that David Kelly had been focusing on that during that period of 2017. I was part of a group that was in Chicago with him, trying to look at senior level development in L&D.
Okay.
So I was wondering if it had any correlation. So
not with this data.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Finish.
No, I'm finished. Thank you.
Well, like I said, this was an open survey. It went out to anyone. However, since that time, the Guild has launched sort of a second initiative called the Learning Leaders Alliance. I don't know if you're aware of that. And that is, in fact, focused on more senior level people or people we want in leadership positions. That launched officially last year. And I'm presenting, they've got an event coming up. I think it's next. I need to look at my calendar. So they had a heavy presence at at Learning 2020 show. And so we haven't done research specific to salaries in that realm, but that doesn't mean we won't. Okay. The data you're seeing here is whoever responded, and we had 10-ish% managers and a little bit at what we would call executive realm.
All right, thank you.
What else did I have to say about? I don't think I had anything else to say. Well, and when I say Atlanta, I'm talking South. I mean, I'm talking New York, California, West Coast, Southeast. The lowest salary we had, I believe, was Alabama or Mississippi. It was an instructional designer making $31,000, a full-time ID. So, when we start talking about averaging, it doesn't mean Atlanta itself is $50,000, but sort of that region compared to New York, compared to California, it was pretty significant difference. And there's a deeper dive into that in the 2018 report. There's much more specific information about Metro and where people were living, and more specifically the salaries, if you want to take a look at that. And I'm interested to see what the shift to remote work is going to do to any of that. I'm wondering how much, location is going to matter. Right now, it still seems to, but I'll be curious to see what happens with that. One of the things we were particularly interested in was whether people had seen a change in their pay last year. And I'll be honest with you, I was very surprised. 41.6% said there had been no change, and 41.7% said they'd increased, their pay had increased. Almost exactly the same number of people. Some had said it had decreased and some said other. And there's two things that happen with that. Sometimes the other was that there was one person who said they wanted to leave a toxic environment and took a $10,000 pay cut, and they added it was worth it. So some people, it was a voluntary cut in pay. For some people, and it was difficult sometimes to see which way they were answering it. It was my fault, kind of the way I constructed the question, I think. But we gave them an opportunity to explain when they said other. A number of people said they had been temporarily furloughed. And so their pay had, in fact, their base pay had decreased for 2020, but it was a temporary decrease coming back up. One person said that they had all taken temporary decreases against better times coming, and they said that did work, that the company was able to keep everybody employed, and that they had started to pay some of it back to make up the difference. Some people said that they had been, asked to take pay cuts, asked to be furloughed, that they were coming back. So that reflects the changes or the decreases in the pay. Few people indicated it was permanently decreased unless they did change jobs or something like that. But I think many of them who made text comments said that things that happened with their salaries often was an effort for the company to try to keep them employed. So by the way, we did some other work with that on another survey, and people said they felt their companies had tried really hard to help make this be okay, to not let people go, to not have to fire anybody, to not have to shut the company down. It wasn't always successful, but people were pretty positive about how management had responded and how they felt they were treated, with some caveats. We'll talk about that. As far
Jane,
as bonuses,
before you start with the next slide, there's a question in the chat about the percentage of respondents who said they had been temporarily furloughed.
We did not ask that specifically. We asked if pay had decreased, and if they said other, we said why. And we didn't slice that data numerically. I would say probably 20 or 25 people said that. But I wasn't specifically looking for that percentage. I also don't have the percentage exactly of number of people who said they'd taken temporary pay cuts. That was fewer. People who've been furloughed but brought back, were coming back, was better. But I don't think it was a significant percentage, but the 5.3 other would be largely comprised of those people who either were furloughed or who had taken temporary pay cuts.
Thank you.
As opposed to completely decreased, but that could be part of it too. One person voluntarily retired early. As far as bonuses went, better than a third of people did not feel that was going to be affected. I think all this is really positive. I have to say, I was kind of surprised at how positive the data was. 14% said the bonuses were gone. Some said they'd been frozen or delayed. 20% of people said they didn't know yet. 21%. And I want to remind you, this was November 2020, and they still didn't know where there were going to be bonuses. Now, I don't know when they give bonuses, but they were saying that then. And NA are people that never get them. Government workers don't usually get them. Education doesn't often expect bonuses, but that had been, that's a pretty significant source of income for a good many people in the corporate world. So 14% saying they're eliminated, that's probably a pretty big hit. I don't know. So as far as some things that may be of interest to you that affect some of the things we're talking about, they did ask specifically about education for the 2017 data. And what they found was that there is a big jump between people with a high school or associate degree and college. The difference between yearly, and this is an annual increase, the difference annually between no degree and a degree is $9,000. So over a lifetime, that could be a fairly significant jump. If you get a master's, this adds 3. If you add a doctorate, that's 3 more. So typically doctorates are making $6,000 more than someone with a bachelor's. For what that's worth. And again, that's annually across your lifetime. One thing that came out of that study too that was interesting was that a big percentage of respondents, I think it's big, said that they were getting tuition reimbursement as part of their package. So, between $4,000 and $5,000 a year for education. And so a good many people say they take advantage of that. I had 2 specifically say that their salaries increased last year because they had finished a graduate degree. of the people who said that they had gotten an increase. So there's that. Also, I will just pitch the state of North Carolina. We have state colleges and they've got tuition reimbursement that covered both my graduate degrees. It was fabulous work. Yay, state government. As far as certifications went, it did not show that coming in with certifications made very much difference, but it made a lot of difference with bonuses. And I'm wondering, although this is me speculating, I'm wondering if that's because the bonuses reflect something that they wanted you to get after you were hired that make you better at your current job, like you've got a new LMS or they've got some new software or something like that. But the certifications mattered more in terms of bonuses, and it was pretty big. People saw their bonuses go up by nearly half once they acquired certifications. In 2017, they asked a question about certifications, and 1,000 people ish responded. 50 of those 1,000 said that 53 said they were PMPs, they're project management professionals. 49 had the CPLP, which I know has changed. The acronym's different now. I'm sorry, what's it called now? There's the ATD certification process, is it?
CPTD?
Right. So I would guess that was shifting to that. 46 had Six Sigma green belts. Okay. And fewer than 5% of the respondents had any other certifications, and 629 people had 0. So more than half of the ones who even answered the question had any kind of certification. It seems like degrees matter more if you're talking about hiring level, and once you're in, that might help. So when I was doing the 2019 review of the job postings, one posting asked for a certification for someone who had a master level credential for a particular LMS. And one asked for what they called an industry training certification, but they didn't seem to really know what they wanted or what that meant. So I will say this again before we finish tonight. Well, virtually every posting specified project management skills. None really required that, even that as a certification or any other certification. So it might be worth musing on that. One thing that I have found really interesting is job titles. So I will beg your indulgence for a moment about a little bit about that. When I was working on the survey in 2019, when I was looking at all the job postings, I was going through to see how they were defining the basic instructional designer job. That tended to be the thing that was being advertised for the most. Sometimes classroom trainer, sometimes developer, or technical specialty like media, but most of the job postings were about instructional designers. And I remembered Cammie Bean had made this list when she wrote The Accidental Instructional Designer in 2015. She said a similar review, now hers wasn't as extensive as mine, but a similar review of job postings showed that this was the standard, more or less, requirements you would see associated with instructional designer role. I want to be clear about something, Nina. The bonuses for the 40% increase in bonus pay, let me do that before we go on. This was from 2017. All right, the data about not getting them this year was really specific to last year, and I imagine that may change back. I just want to be really clear. We're talking about different years when I talk about the I'm more interested in the effect of certification. They don't seem to have much to do with getting you hired, but they may make difference after you get there. So this was the list Cammie Bean came up with, a basic instructional designer role. And I would guess most of you would agree this is what it looks like. So here's the thing. This was 2015. In 2019, I went and did a look at a similar but bigger look at instructional designer jobs being advertised. And this is what the list looks like, plus all the things on the blue list.
Wow.
And I don't know how many of you know people who kind of what you do in your jobs, or how many people you know out in the field, but I have a friend who is an instructional, well, their job title is instructional designer in a hospital, and she's doing everything in the blue, plus she runs the LMS, plus they've asked her to build an app to support a web conference, plus they've asked her to learn about video. I mean, it's just crazy. The thing is, her salary hasn't really changed, her job title hasn't really changed, and they still call her an instructional designer. When we talk about somebody doing a little bit of everything, I know a number of people like that. So the role I talk about the bucket overfloweth. The role keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I am curious as to what we need to do about that. I feel like it's almost at the point of taking advantage of people.
Mm-hmm.
To expect that one human can come in and be expected to do all these things and do them well. I mean, it's fine if there's 3 things on the list you like, but I just see pylon after pylon after pylon as new technologies emerge, as new tools come out, as new fads come in. And many of you know that a lot of people were already doing jobs when suddenly everything got shifted to virtual classroom last year. They suddenly had to be WebEx producers, they had to teach Zoom, right? They had to redesign stuff. So I worry that we may need to take a bigger role in tightening up some of these things. That's just Jane's thought.
No,
And
I
Jane-
agree.
And Jane, do you know if there's training or financial assistance offered so people can acquire these skills?
Well, that's some of what we do. I mean, that's partly what the Guild is trying to support, is getting people better training or getting them to training or introducing them to vendors that they need. I don't recall from 2017 how much in the way of support for workshops and professional level training were being offered to employees being asked to take these things on. That may be partly what the certifications were worth, that they were getting bonuses for. I'm not sure, but I know an awful lot of trainers. I'm gonna get in trouble, I'm sure, throw things at me, who are kind of pleasers. I mean, that's partly why they're in that role. And to be honest with you, as one of these people myself, who wore some hats across a career, sometimes there was something cool I did kind of want to learn about, and I didn't really mind being asked to do that, but I didn't want to be the LMS administrator, or I didn't want to create dashboards, but I wanted to do other things. So I think sometimes there's some of that too, and sometimes it's difficult to say no, and sometimes the people asking don't know how much they're asking for, right? And we're trying to keep up. I mean, we don't want our own products to be inferior or look out of date. I mean, some of it's professional development. Anyway, the reason I was interested in this, and it's something I've been musing about and I've talked with a lot of people about, and just because it was my survey, I asked the question on the recent survey in November, does your job title accurately reflect the work you do? And 20% of the people said no. I was actually thinking it would be higher. I thought more people would say no, but some of them said they feel that they are being asked to do a lot of things, and the title doesn't reflect that. They've been asked to take on extra work, and the title doesn't reflect that. One person used the phrase, and I thought this was really good. One said the tempo of work changed in 2020. And I think that's a really interesting phrase. The tempo of work changed, and our pay has not kept up with that. Like I said, we're asked to do all this support for live stuff. We have to be on camera all the time. We have to be present live. I mean, this is different. The classroom trainers are kind of used to this, but the rest of us, we're not used to having to focus and be on camera and not be able to do other stuff all the time, or having to teach Zoom all the time, or whatever. So I just think it's an interesting conversation for our field. It might be something that you would like to tease out at a chapter meeting or something when you're together again, is, what do we need to do to better refine our titles? What do we need to do to better clarify different roles in our business? And I suspect, because I worked in HR, I was housed under state HR for years, I suspect a whole lot of job postings are just sort of thrown together, or they're copied over from the last time a job was open, and somebody looks through some other postings and adds things to it. Because you would see things like, we need somebody skilled in an authoring tool like Storyline or PowerPoint or Word. It didn't even the stuff they were asking for. So there was some of that.
And you do simulations.
Right.
Yes.
Other assorted tasks I thought was really interesting, because we see this all the time. My favorite one was that the instructional designer will also be expected to coordinate the employee blood drive. I'm like, okay. All right. Again, being more clear about what we do. One thing that has nothing to do with any of the data I've talked about, we did do a survey last year, because I keep referencing this information about the shift from face-to-face to virtual. We did several surveys across some months last year, just asking. Before the pandemic, 23% of our respondents said they were doing nothing virtually. And by May, at least half of them were saying they were doing half of their stuff virtually. It was a huge shift, and people in May were doing no face-to-face. It was crazy. I think that's going to stay. I think it's going to be a bit like somebody said about remote work. Once they started doing it, they realized it was okay, and they'll probably stick with it. Almost 90% of our respondents project that less than half of all training is ever going to go face-to-face again. So suddenly we understand it can happen online. We can do it online, and they think that's going to stay, and that can affect the kind of skills we're asking for. I have seen a lot of stuff the last year about about Zoom security and how to make a background for your virtual background for your Zoom meeting, and how to make sure people are paying attention and whatnot. I haven't seen a whole lot on these are the skills a trainer needs if they're going to move face-to-face to a virtual setting. Here are what the designers need to understand about moving. Here are the tools they're not using very much. I think that we're looking at still more people online, the same people who were already taking on a lot. In 2017, 42% of people responding were working remotely. And in 2020, nearly 60% of people are saying, I don't need to live where I work. So that's a pretty big change. Of that, about 25% of the people said it was because of COVID, that they don't need to live where they're working, or that they have gone remote, or that the company doesn't mind that, or that the workplace has shifted in some way. So I think that's a pretty big shift. And I'm again curious as how that will affect what we have traditionally seen as salaries, and how living in a metro region, affected salaries. And it's interesting. I thought this was kind of poignant. We hear a lot about people saying it's working and they're happy, and I'm certainly one of them. But there are some people who have not necessarily enjoyed this change. So I'm just putting it out there that there are still some folks, this isn't the best desired thing. People working at home trying to homeschool children said they'd love to get an office they can go to just for a few hours a week. So, just to give it a little perspective, we finally have convinced, I think, management that this can work, and we finally, workers have figured out how to be comfortable. But not everybody is. There were a few comments that were kind of interesting reflections on the current times. And this is one, I think this is about the last thing I wanted to show you. In 2017, we had 90% of respondents, and that's upwards of 3,000 people, said they were happy or very happy with their job. 35% of people said they loved their jobs, which I think is fabulous, and I love it. And I think I might have been surprised, but I think it's great that this many people love their jobs. And so my question to you is, why do 25% of them want to leave? Now, this isn't the same people. This was of all the respondents, this is what we had, but of all the respondents, and that could have been people who were already unhappy. Why do happy people want to change jobs? You tell me. Why do happy workers want to change jobs? And while you're
maybe they want to change jobs just so that they continue to grow and learn new things. Maybe they want to be in a different industry or balance in life.
They want a challenge. Maybe they want to move. Maybe they don't like the weather. Maybe they want pay. And I want to get back to Janine. Yes, Janine, I agree. I think that's going to change how companies hire. They can hire anybody anywhere in the country. Is probably easier than in the world, rather than just hire the 4 candidates who happen to live in Creedmoor, North Carolina, who apply, right? I think that will change. Because then maybe it'll level the playing field. I don't know what it'll do to salaries, though. I don't know whether salaries will stay. If you work for a company in New York, you get the New York salary, or if they say, well, you live in Creedmoor, North Carolina, you get paid what the market value in North Carolina. That's what I'll be interested to see. The ability to grow and try new things. I love jobs, but I want better weather and pay. So we saw a lot of that. I mean, it was typically, I want to move, I want to relocate, I want more, I want better pay, I want to be a manager, I'm bored with my content. We have one person who answers every survey we do, says they only work with dog food. I don't know what company it is. They don't say, but they say, I do dog food. I do dog food. And one I know I have a friend who they have a big construction firm, and there's a person dedicated to nothing but construction site safety. And it's like, how long are they going to do that? How long before they get bored? So here were some things though from 2017 that I thought were interesting, that were unusual. I thought there were not the usual answers about relocation or more pay or whatever. A third of them, better than a third, wanted to be in organizations that valued learning and development. If you've been in one that didn't, you know what that's like, right? Only 55% felt they were fairly compensated, and fewer than a third felt their supervisors worked to help them get fair compensation. So it wasn't just that they felt they weren't being paid enough, it's that they felt that their supervisors could do more about it and chose not to. And I think that's interesting to those of you who may be managers, is they are perceiving that nobody's really trying to get them that. And that reflects back too on what's been happening with the bucket for IDs getting fuller and fuller and fuller, and in 2020 having all the new stuff added on. They feel that management isn't fighting for them, apparently. And as far as some of the others they did want to improve career prospects and expand experience and work on higher visibility or more innovative kind of stuff. But I thought that I thought it was especially interesting that so many people said they want to be in organizations that value L&D, because their perception is that the organizations do not. For 2020, a little bit better than that wanted to change jobs. Usually it was about, in the past it was about 25%, and this time it was more like 28. Of the people here who plan to change jobs, and it was fewer than 200, start with, nearly 30% said it was tied to the desire for more work. I mean, for remote work. So that is it was always a big incentive. Being able to work remotely was always a perk, and now it's becoming even bigger. And there are going to be a lot more options for that going forward. But people, they were interested in work-life balance. Some people wanted more challenging work. All right. Some had issues with culture or management. I think that's typical, but I thought there were some kind of interesting bits coming out of that. So to sort of bring us to the end, when we talk about salary, when we talk about, for those of you who may be looking at a job change, what really seemed to matter the most, education affects salary, location affects salary. We don't know how long that's going to hold true. And of everything that they could ask for, that everybody wants project management skills. I saw very few job postings that did not ask for that. Of the people who responded to having certifications, that was the one they had. So, I think that's an expectation for any job, more than even technical requirements or specifics about particular software, particular other abilities from that list of instructional design tasks. That is what people were looking for. So I'm happy to chat a little bit more. If you're not familiar with what we do, the Learning Guild, I do have a report a month that comes out. We have a number of publications, but these are mine. And they're free. You can access them free with a free membership, but we just kind of want to know who downloads them. That's how we know who's looking at them. And you're welcome to any of that, including the other things I've mentioned. I gave you most of the data from the 2020 survey, but the other stuff I skimmed around in and jumped like a rock across a pond. So I do invite you to go take a look at those if there was something that interested you. So what else do we need to talk about?
Folks, any questions?
Not seeing any.
Yeah, there were comments throughout.
Yeah, I think I got to a lot of them. So I'm curious, what do you feel like we need to do something about the instructional designer bucket? Or
oh God, yes.
Yeah, what do we need to do? And I'll tell you what, I'm going to bring my I'm going to stop sharing.
I want to do a compare contrast of that list. I was trying to, it's really quite a different list on the right side of the screen. And sometimes I think in the collective development of someone's career, if you've always been in an organization and you can figure out what's going on or what needs to be, you might be chosen because you're the person that does the research. You're the one that's curious. And then once you're curious, you get the assignment possibly. Depends on what the culture is, I guess. but definitely this is an interesting comparison.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking, and it's
It
shocking.
is.
It's shocking partly because it's not really comparison. It's not really,
Correct.
we used to do this. It's both of the things. You do all of this now.
All of it,
And
both buckets.
it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy. You know what happened to me? I don't want this to come off sounding, I don't know what it is. I always liked technology, and stuff would catch my fancy, and I would take time to learn it, or I would take time to train myself to use it, or what have you. And I always seemed to be I knew how to do something just about the time the state decided it wanted that. So it wasn't like suddenly, it's what you were saying. It wasn't suddenly, Jane, go learn how to do virtual classroom. It was like, oh, well, we need to do virtual classroom. Well, Jane did that, right? So sort of being ready to do the things you want to do. But I will also say, I appreciate the point that it's hard to say no, that you don't want to get fired.
Mhm.
I will also say though, that I don't know that we can't learn to do that better. I think that instructional design programs I've been in, the graduate programs I've been in, and the certifications I've seen my friends attend, they don't include negotiation and assertiveness skills.
Mhm.
And I think that's something maybe we need more training in, because I used to say, I would say no to things, or just, I'm not good at that. I'm not an artist. We need a graphic artist for this. We don't need, Jane will slap something together. We could do a beautiful job if you'll let me contract with somebody for it. Come on.
Yeah.
So sometimes just
Yeah.
saying I can get you a better product another way can help. But I know a lot of people who are taking on an awful lot of tasks, like my friend at the hospital who's doing everything for the pay she was making 3 years ago. She's building dashboards, she's building web apps. It's a lot to have to learn.
I mean, I just look at it, right? And I think, oh my God, they're so different skill sets, right?
Mhm.
A programmer is a very different skill set than a graphic designer, than somebody who writes or who can really do
Right.
instructional design,
Right.
who can take
Right.
a pile of stuff and make it into something that teaches something, right? And
Right.
that person shouldn't have to be the one who designs the pictures that go along with it, because those are two different skill sets. My graphic artist couldn't do what an instructional designer does,
Right.
but she
Right.
does beautiful work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I argued a lot about the difference between designers and developers.
Mhm.
Right. And I didn't always win. I don't mean to say that I did. And I'm seeing somebody said that being curious hasn't led to positive things for me. Here's the thing: the things I was curious about, nobody else was doing, so there was no mess to clean up. You have to stay that far ahead. But that's not really what you came to talk about tonight. It's just the thing that's on my mind. What else do we want to say about salaries before we finish?
And with the level of demand or expertise increasing, do you see a trend that organizations will pay more, or that people will decide to be more entrepreneurial and embrace consulting? We did have some comments in the chat about leaving the job to go solo.
I am seeing, like I said, I think I mentioned at the beginning, we had a good many respondents say that they were doing both, that they were doing their jobs, but they were freelancing some on the side. I don't know whether they intend to go freelance full time. I will say, I don't have the data in front. I'm sorry, I can't put my hands on it right now. That of the people, some of the people who wanted to change jobs, there was also a text opportunity to add comments to that. I believe 3 or 4 of those people said they needed health insurance. So, consulting and freelancing, that's an issue in the United States for what you're going to do. So no, I haven't seen a trend, but again, for 2020, that's not really what I was looking for. We were really trying to see what effect the pandemic was having. The good news was that for the most part, L&D people were staying employed, which is not true of a lot of other places. And some of the folks doing freelance and contract work, one of them said, it's raining work on us right now. Everybody needs help moving stuff online, so we're doing really well. So I thought that was positive, not for the 28 people who are unemployed, but I have not picked up on a trend. And to the question about are companies hiring differently, my sense from the job postings was that companies don't really know what they want. Mostly, they write these long lists of things, and then they meet a candidate they like, and we've all worked with that person, right? Right? They interviewed really well, but the people interviewing for some of this don't even know how to evaluate what they're looking at.
There's a related comment in the chat about the client or C-suite
Mhm.
not only knowing but not caring. They just wanting things done.
Mhm.
I get that impression too.
Mhm.
I do too, but this brings me back to last month's topic of the TD capability model and the whole reason for it. It's a great seg. So like just even do the model so that you're like, so my boss knows exactly what I do. I don't know if he can even really say sometimes. He just expects it to get done. So
Right, right. And I think that speaks to, I could beat my drum about showing your work. That was my last book about we need to be more visible about what we do and the work we do and the products we make. But I will say the last hiring experience I had before I left the state, this would have been late 2017. We were interviewing for an instructional designer, and we interviewed, I think we picked 5 or 6 people to interview. 2 of them had portfolios. And I just thought it was unbelievable that they came in with no real, none of them had a lesson plan. 2 of them had portfolios. Some people came in just empty-handed, wanting to tell us how great they are at storyline or something. This is crazy. So I think people do need to be able to be clear about what they do, to show it to people, to explain it, to make them understand why this was challenging, this was difficult, or this wasn't. But I don't know that we do a very good job of selling ourselves in that way, of marketing ourselves that way, branding, if you will.
Yeah.
Oh, and they've asked you to please share reflections in the, there's a link in the chat.
Yeah.
Again, I invite you, this was kind of a quick tour of some things. I invite you to please go look at the full reports if there was anything that piqued your interest tonight. There's more data in all of them.
Yeah, and absolutely. I don't
Thank
think that this is something we could exhaust with just 1 hour of conversation. It feels almost like a snowball where the demand is growing in an environment that's equally changing altogether, and the loss of our parameters of at least what we knew of instructional design and program management, project management, a lot has been changing altogether. This was extremely helpful, Jane. So thank you. Thank
Sure,
you
thank you. Thanks for having me.
much. Yeah.
Sure. All right, good
And
night.
thank you, Jane.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
And to those of you participating tonight, you will see that I added a link asking you to please leave your feedback. We really want to get not just your feedback, but what insights you're pulling from this. And I could see from your comments that this was extremely interactive and rich. So what insights are you getting out of it? And the link will lead you to really just one question. So please take a minute to share your thoughts. And if you're willing to be featured in one of our social media posts or in our website, please make sure to add your name as well, okay? And before I let you go, I wanted to bring a couple of things to your attention. So next month, it's a global International Women's Month, and the 8th is Women's Day. And of course, we're having a panel with 3 phenomenal trailblazers. So please plan on attending, spread the word that we're going to have Angie Brainerd with Right Management, Beth Simonetti, a phenomenal HR leader with Tech Data, Maria Rivera with New York University, who has been leading AR, VR in the school, and Stephanie Harrison, who's the founder and CEO of a company focused on happiness at work. Okay, so please join and share the love with these phenomenal speakers. And if you haven't visited our site recently, we posted our learning journey for the year. You can download this visual on the website, readily available, so you keep sight of what's coming. But there are lots of interesting activities coming up, and we really look forward to having you there. Okay. With that, thank you all so much for joining tonight. I hope to see you on March 18th. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you much.
Thanks.
Thank you.